It is such a pleasure to be here. I'm actually still at school. That is one of my jobs. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you to kind of introduce myself. Let me get this in presentation mode. Now, I am by day, I'm an elementary school counselor at Jenks Northwest Elementary. So I'm a little on the spot tonight because I was looking in the participants and I had several people tell me at work today, hey, Lauren, I'm going to see you tonight. So if my colleagues are watching, you have to be kind to me, okay? So because we all need help with this. I'm also a certified parent educator. I've been teaching active parenting. I've got a lot of training in love and logic and practical parent education. And I also used to be a parents as teachers parent educator, and I did home visits with families birth to 3. Sadly, some of that funding went away. Gosh, when the state had its big budget cuts years ago. So I miss doing that, but I love doing what I'm doing now because I get to do that combination of teaching and support and crisis intervention. Because I'm a full-on nerd, which you will be able to take advantage of tonight with all the random information that I will share with you. I recently was approved to be an LPC candidate. So I finished out that degree in May, and I'm seeing clients on the side, predominantly trying to run groups and things like that, and love teaching stuff like this. And I'm so glad I got to meet Erin years ago when we were doing parenting classes and things like that together in the district. I also teach parenting classes for family and children services because there's just such a need. We need help. And especially in light, if we had any issues with anxiety before, throw in a pandemic, and germs and all the things and the unknowns and all of the financial and emotional impact, it makes our parenting job harder, but it also, we've been dealing with anxiety. And so how we manage that or don't realize how maybe we're not managing that well, our kids can really pick up on that. They can hear our conversations and our stress and things like that. So I really want to give you practical tips. So this is kind of a little bit of an overview of what we'll be talking about. First off, kind of what is anxiety? Really looking at this from a brain-based perspective. I know that we as parents and caregivers, we are very familiar with the behaviors, the crying, the meltdowns, the shutdowns, the refusal to do things. But sometimes we're so focused on the behavior, we don't realize the foundation of all of this. So really taking that brain-based look at this. From that brain-based perspective, we're going to focus on integration. How can we integrate the emotional brain with the logic brain? That can help us. Trying to develop new brain patterns and really build coping skills. The integration piece, really going to talk about Dan Siegel's techniques. He is a wonderful, and I apologize if I butcher how to pronounce his name. Any book that Dan Siegel writes, I recommend buying, reading, pulling it up on Audible. He is just such a prolific writer of all sorts of parenting books, and he is a neuroscientist. So what I love, and I've learned so much from reading his books, I first introduced to them when I was in grad school getting my LPC degree, wonderful practical brain-based techniques. So we'll mention a lot of his stuff tonight and a lot of strategies from his book called The Whole Brainchild. And then really trying to build those new patterns, brain awareness strategies, understanding anxiety, trying to create some new responses, and then coping skills. What can we do to prevent kind of being overwhelmed by anxiety, and what can we do to respond in the moment when we feel that? Because one thing I can tell you is anxiety is not going to go away. It's actually a necessary thing. Anxiety, it's normal. It's a normal, usually temporary response to stress. We worry. There are some benefits to anxiety. If you are taking a test and you have that test anxiety, now there can be too much test anxiety, which makes you shut down. But that little extra stimulus of, I got to do well, that can actually sometimes help focus and increase focus. And it's a necessary cue for us to be able to adapt and cope. Anxiety is a signal that our brain is sending to us, like something's going on, I got to pay attention. We might not notice that if we didn't have that feeling of anxiety. But what I really want to focus on is not the behavior parts of anxiety. At a true foundational point, anxiety is a state of the brain. The brain is in an anxious state. The brain is sending out adrenaline and cortisol and overacting in certain areas of the brain that light up with a fear response or things like that. The brain, then when it sends out those chemicals and those neurotransmitters, that influences our feelings, which influences our behaviors. But it starts in the brain. And that, for me, has been the biggest learning curve for me personally in the last 6 years, as I've become more aware of Dr. Bruce Perry's work on trauma and Dan Siegel's books. I had to read the whole Brainchild in grad school. I just didn't know. And sadly, I wish that I would have known, because one of my sons, who's now 23, he has struggled with anxiety his whole life. And I focused a little too much on the behavior. And sometimes the behavior didn't make sense to me because I'm not an anxious person usually. So, for me, it was really hard to connect as a mom when it wasn't logical how he was behaving. His fears weren't logical. Like, how can you be afraid of that? It didn't make sense to me. And if I had known more about how the brain works and how I could have really been teaching him from an early age different strategies for calming down his brain so he wasn't so overwhelmed by those feelings, it could have really helped him. Now, he's learned so many things in spite of me, and he's taught me so many things. So I'll share a lot of those tonight. But here's when anxiety becomes a problem. Number one, it's normal. But when it becomes a problem, pathological, some people would say, is autonomy. There's no recognizable trigger. Like, I am going to be anxious if I'm about to take a test. That's typical. I'm going to be anxious if I'm driving through Dallas at rush hour traffic, which I've had to do. I actually have a playlist of calming music that I play when I'm driving through Dallas in rush hour traffic when I would be on the way to visit my son in college. But when there becomes no recognizable trigger, it just kind of comes out of nowhere. It's more of a regular state. That's when it becomes a problem. The intensity. It's okay to feel nervous and worried, but if it becomes more than we can bear or more than our child can bear, that's when it becomes a problem. The duration, how long does it last? If it's persistent, instead of coming and going, instead of being temporary, and the behavior, in our attempt to cope with anxiety, or our children's attempt to cope with anxiety, there can be a lot of avoidance and withdrawal behavior. I'm going to avoid anything that makes me anxious. I'm going to withdraw from situations and not even try. Which is why the next class that Aaron's going to do a calming water bottle event, and I'll have that slide up at the end. The next class that we'll do in December that I'll teach, it's going to talk about growth mindset, really developing that perseverance and that grit when we want to give up and just withdraw from that. Because you know what? I don't like to do things that make me uncomfortable. If I struggle with anxiety, I don't want to do things that are scary. So I'm just going to avoid that and withdraw from those situations. So you might recognize yourself or your children in any of those descriptions. Now, some of us might just want to learn about the temporary, come and go anxiety that we have. So all of us are here with personal stories or worried about our children. So I want to give you strategies for all, because there definitely are preventive things that you can do as well. So this was really surprising to me as I did a lot of research in anxiety. Sometimes it makes sense to avoid something that you're nervous about. And as a mom, when my child was young, I would so try to control his environment. We're just not even going to do that because I'm not sure what his reaction is going to be. I did that in my attempt to protect him. I didn't want him to be uncomfortable because I didn't really have a full understanding of anxiety, of the anxiety cycle, and how sometimes our attempt to help can actually become a problem. All right. So here's anxiety cycle. Anxiety happens, some situation that leads to uncomfortable symptoms like worry or a racing heart or sweating or feeling a little bit overwhelmed. I'm starting to get anxious. So the feeling's coming. Then comes the avoidance. I am going to try to control my anxious symptoms by just avoiding the thing that I am nervous about. Maybe that's skipping class because I don't want to do a presentation. Maybe that's, not going to a reunion because I'm worried about what people are going to think about me. Maybe that's, avoiding talking to a partner or talking to a coworker about something that, like a conflict that, I really need to solve this problem, but I'm too scared to talk about it. That makes me too nervous. So I avoid it. Well, guess what happens? I get some short-term relief.
Hi, So I got it on the headphones.
If you guys can go ahead and press mute, that would be great. Anyone who's got their microphone on. So you know what happens? I get some short-term relief. Okay, I feel better. Oh, I didn't have to do that presentation. Oh, I feel so much better. What relief. But that relief becomes addictive. And because we're not really pushing through, developing coping skills to deal with that anxiety, it almost becomes worse. Then we can really grow long-term anxiety, because that initial fear that led to avoidance, the fear worsens, the avoidance worsens, the withdrawal worsens. And you've heard stories of people who are agoraphobic. They are afraid to leave their house. You know, kids will miss days upon days of school because they're terrified to go to school because something might happen that makes them feel worried. So initially we get that relief, but it's kind of something that comes back to bite us. For me, as a mom, I had no idea I was creating this cycle. Now, I didn't do this for my other sons because they didn't struggle with anxiety. So, hey, go for it. But for my middle son, I really did. And so it's been a beautiful thing to watch him grow. As a matter of fact, he just moved from Oklahoma all the way across the United States to Boston. And it was so cool to hear his reasoning, because he's learned so much about himself as a result of anxiety. He can't ignore it. He's had to deal with it. And he actually told me, he's like, Mom, you know what? If I really want to grow, I need to move away from here. Because he had gotten accepted at grad school in St. Louis, some in Texas. And he's just like, if I'm really going to grow, I need to move away from here. So where did he move? To Boston. Doesn't have a car, has used public transportation for the first time. And it was really hard for him, but he did it on purpose, because he knows when he kicks this cycle of anxiety in the pants and says, forget it, I'm not going to give into my fear, that's when he's experienced the greatest personal growth. It actually just took him a long time to get there, because he started this, especially in college, just getting out of his comfort zone. But he had to force himself to do that. It was not natural. So, cycle of anxiety. If you have accidentally created this cycle, you know what I want you to do? Give yourself a big old break. Parenting is hard. Parenting an anxious child is hard. You were doing this from a place of love and protection. Just realize, though, that really pushing with support and with teaching coping skills through an anxious, anxiety-producing situation can really develop growth. Now, I mentioned Dan Siegel in his books. So here's the book that we're going to be referencing, The Whole Brainchild, and the Whole Brainchild Workbook. Oh, I thought that I had the workbook out, but I don't. Anyway, if I were to get a book, because I'm really practical, if I were to pick between the two, I'd get the workbook. So the workbook, it's about $15, worth every penny. In the workbook, it actually goes through all of the principles that the book does. The book is really building that foundational theoretical approach to brain-based neuroscience of behavior and why we do what we do. The Whole Brainchild Workbook gives you, it's almost like the Cliff Notes. It gives you details and information about that, but then it also has like cartoons where here's how you say it to your child. Instead of saying it this way, say it this way. It has reflective pieces where you can sit and write. Okay, so with this idea of connect, then redirect. Give me an example of something that you might try at home. It's really having you not just read about it, but personalize it. So of course, get both. But if I were to choose one, I would get the workbook, because I find it to be incredibly practical. And it's just something, just imagine if you spent the next year working through that workbook, not going through it in 2 weeks, who has time for that? Spend the next year, do a page a day, do a couple of pages a week, really get this down inside you, and it can make a huge difference. He's also written books like Parenting from the Inside Out. When I last looked, I think he had over 50 books that he's written. Any of his books are great, but when it comes to really helping with anxiety and having some brain-based parent responses, highly recommend that. So you can have an idea of the kinds of things he teaches. He has this thing called the hand model of the brain. The more I, as an adult, can understand the parts of my brain and the fact they have a job, there's no bad part of the brain. There are much more frustrating feelings, much more frustrating states of the brain, but there's no bad parts. Every part of the brain has a job to do. It just might be doing it too much. Like if the amygdala, which produces our fight or flight place, is overactive, that can almost overwhelm our thinking brain, which is where the logic and, making decisions and working through problems rests. But all the brain parts have a job. Just a lot of times, especially in children, those parts aren't working very well together. So first off, it starts with having an understanding of the brain. So he's got this whole idea called the hand model of the brain, where this represents your spinal cord. He's got your, basic brain, your limbic system, your prefrontal cortex, but he kind of explains that. You can actually teach this to your kids. It can be even a nonverbal, without words, actual way of them being able to tell you where are they at in their brain. The weird thing is just them even thinking about where they're at in their brain actually is step one in calming down their brain. So it's kind of interesting. So I'm going to change what I am sharing. Let's see here. I'm going to do a new share and okay. And get over to that video. All right, so I'm going to get this playing, and this is Dan Siegel explaining the hand model of the brain. And Aaron, just pop on and let me know if there's any issues with the sound, okay?
Okay. One of the most rewarding experiences for me has been to study brain science and apply it to the experience of parenting. And the hand model of the brain that I use to teach parents is very useful to understand that. So if you take your thumb and put it in the middle of your palm, put your fingers over the top, this is a very useful model of the brain. And when we can actually see in front of us what's going on in the brain, then we can change what the brain does. So let me walk you through very basically what happens in this brain and the structures in it. And it goes like this. The spinal cord comes up, representing the wrist, and then you have coming up into the skull, the brain stem and the limbic area, which work together to help regulate arousal and your emotions and the way you have a fight, flight, freeze response. These are below the cortex, the limbic and brainstem areas, and the cortex is this higher part of the brain that allows us to perceive the outside world, to think and reason. And this frontmost part of the brain, right behind your forehead, so the person's oriented like this, is actually the part that regulates the subcortical, limbic, and brainstem areas. This regulation is very important because sometimes we can have all sorts of things happen in our life. We're tired, we're exhausted, someone pushes a particular emotional button, and we can flip our lids. So rather than being tuned in and connected and balanced and flexible, we can lose all of that flexibility, even lose moral reasoning, and act in ways that are terrifying to others, including our children. Now, you can actually bring yourself back online and come back to the high road and make a repair with your child, and that's important to explain to them. And you can also use this hand model of the brain to explain to children, even as young as 5 and 6, how to understand when their emotions are rising up from the brainstem and limbic areas here, and how it's overriding the prefrontal area and making it so they may be about to flip their lids. So I've had kids come tell me that they're about to go flip their lids and they need a break. They need a timeout. And by even just naming that, they can tame it. And that's the power of using the hand model for ourselves and our children to help us all make sense of what goes on in the emotional communication that we have in the course of day-to-day life.
All right. Let me do a new share, get back to the PowerPoint. I have to talk out loud. That's how my brain works. I hope that when you see that, I've learned so much the more that I've understood my brain. If you teach your child and yourself about the parts of the brain, guess what? It's hard to be a bad boy. It's hard to be a bad girl when my brain is about to flip its lid. I'm not bad. My brain is in freak out mode. I'm not a bad, terrible person. Now, yes, I can absolutely do some behaviors that are not okay, that hurt people or property or really, hurt relationships. But I'm not a bad boy. I'm not a bad girl. My brain needs help getting back online. Now, the other thing too, if you know anything about trauma, those traumatic memories, really stressful situations, especially things that happen in childhood, that gets stored in the limbic system. So sometimes when he said, the brain's job is to kind of work together, sometimes those parts aren't working together. Sometimes this limbic system is so overactive, even though they're not conscious things that we're thinking about, the brain remembers. There's, a phrase, the brain keeps the score. One of my grad school professors wrote a book, Why Am I Not Over This By Now? Because if we don't deal with the trauma at the brain level, at the limbic system, sometimes it can continue to have an impact and take over our logical problem solving abilities. So there's some really good therapeutic techniques that I'll talk about that. But really, this is teaching our kids and ourselves about the brain's got a job. If we have more of an awareness of where we are at in our brain, we can do things on purpose to calm down our brain, to bring the thinking brain back online. The other thing to remember about kids' brains, though, is our brains don't stop developing till we're about 26 years old. So I can't see all your hands right now, but I'm wondering, a show of hands of how many of you had children before you were 26 years old. You had children with half a brain. Not really, your brain was there. But guess what? This is still under construction for our kids. The last part of the brain to develop is this prefrontal cortex. Its job is to regulate emotions, think about consequences, make good decisions, have empathy, and realize how their behavior affects other people. It's even where they start to develop this feeling of right and wrong and morality, not just doing things so I don't get in trouble, but doing things to be helpful and compassionate and those higher level character traits. That's all under construction. So sometimes we respond to our kids with a fully developed brain, expecting them to see the world like we see the world with our fully developed brain. It's not even there yet. So that's why really specific brain-based parent responses, and I'll teach you some of those, actually help with that brain development. It helps them make connections that haven't just been made yet. So he has this whole idea in his books, The Whole Brainchild, is we want to have things that he calls integrated responses. All of the parts of the brain have jobs. On top of that, our brain is like cut in half. It's like like if we had an egg and we cut the egg in half, there's hemispheres. There's a left side of the brain and a right side of the brain. And each sides of the brain have their own responsibilities. So the left brain, just think left logic, left logic. Left side of the brain, it's logical, linear. It uses words. It's very literal. Like it can actually problem solve. It can evaluate a situation and think, oh, I need to avoid doing that next time. And next time I'm going to try this, this, and this. That's all the logical part. So think left logic. But guys, we don't just have one half of a brain, even though we act like we do sometimes. All right, sorry. We also have another side of the brain. The right side of the brain is the one that senses emotions, and it gets information from body language. It's nonverbal. It can see the big picture. Some people refer to this as the creative side of our brain. Sometimes if you are a true artist, you tend to be a little bit right brain dominant, which means, that part of your brain is really well developed. So the way I remember what side of the brain does what is left logic. And then Matthew McConaughey is one of my favorites. Actors. He's not too bad to look at either. So it's okay for me to say that, he used to have this phrase, or still has this phrase, where he would say, all right, all right, all right. So when I hear right, all right, all right, all right, that's the artistic side. That's the actor, Matthew McConaughey. That's the creative feelings, emotional side of the brain. Now, kids, that part of the brain tends to be a little bit more overpowering the younger they are, because the logical parts of their brain haven't been fully developed yet. Some of that's just from lack of experience. They really don't know what's going to happen because they've never done that before, But the more you grow and mature and have the opportunity for a supportive adult to help you make those connections, we can get those parts working together. Where parents live? Well, when we're not angry, where we live? We live in the logic zone. We have all sorts of logic-based responses. Don't worry, there's nothing to be afraid of. Boy, when our child is afraid, does that make them not afraid? It's not a big deal that it broke, just fix it. Absolutely, you can fix it. But if your child's not in their logical brain and they just broke their favorite thing, their world is over. There's no reason to cry. Losing is part of the game. That's actually true. Losing is a part of life. But you can have feelings about losing too. Homework is your job. Just get it done. Focus and you'll finish sooner. Our typical ways of correcting behavior are logic-based. We often don't know how to talk to feelings and have logic. And that's how we were probably talked to when we were a kid. Now, sometimes we had a parent who lived too much in their emotional brain, and there was the yelling and the screaming and overreacting to everything, which also created the same kind of fear response in us as kids. But a lot of times, if you start to listen to yourself, you'll realize I immediately want to go and I want to start fixing the problem. So according to Dan Siegel, one of the more effective ways, so that's better than nothing, but one of the more effective ways to respond is to have responses that integrate both sides of the brain. For example, right brain responses like connecting to feelings, watching for the nonverbal language, being present, in addition to being able to move into left brain responses like helping them solve problems, using words, planning. Those are the kinds of things that lead to integration. Here's how you do that. So one, he's got some, in his book, he has like 10 or 11 strategies. So I've just picked the first few because they're really the biggies. Whole brain strategy number one, connect, then redirect. Here's what that means. I'm going to connect to the right. Remember, the right is all right, all right, all right, the emotional side of the brain. I'm going to connect to my child where they are at in their feelings. Connect to feelings. Get down on their eye level while you're talking to them. Have facial expressions that are warm and open and inviting. Allow for timing. Let them finish what they're trying to say before interrupting or responding, using that sense of positive touch. Now, some kids don't like to be touched when they're upset. Other kids having that supportive hand on the back or scratching their back or holding them in a hug while they're a little overwhelmed, that can help them feel connected to you. Other people, they don't want to be touched. So watch your tone of voice, because you know what? When kids are in the right brain, what they're doing can be a little frustrating. Show empathy. Pause. When I was in one of my grad classes, I've used this, and I have a tendency to talk super fast, which I kind of have to talk fast tonight. But when I'm working with a student or in a counseling session or talking to a colleague who's in a supportive conversation, it's soft, low, and slow. I'm going to talk to you in a soft voice. I'm going to lower my voice, and I'm going to slow down the pace. Just that soft, low, and slow, that really creates connection. It feels safe. And it's literally a strategy. Initially, when I started doing this, I would be thinking, oh, Lauren, soft, low, slow. And I would make myself do that. And the connection increased. So we start there. We connect to the right, where they're at in their feelings. Sometimes even things like a mood meter. And these are all over the internet. They call it zones of regulation or just a mood meter. Sometimes with younger children, man, you seem really angry right now. Or, hey, why don't you tell me where you're at? Point to where you're at on the mood meter. You know, that's a way to connect to the feeling. Or I'm just saying, man, you seem frustrated. You seem really sad, before I jump to fix it mode. So first connect to the right. That builds that connection. Now I'm going to bring them over to the left by after I've connected to the right and the feelings, I can then redirect with the left. Now I can move into problem solving mode. I can help them come up with solutions. We can plan for the next time this happens, or plan for things that we're afraid of, or, role play and practice things. We can actually move to logical explanations and even set boundaries and even establish consequences if those need to be had. But if we immediately go to the left and use logic while our kids are still in their right brain, you are like Charlie Brown's teacher. Wah, 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 wah. And you could be having the most brilliant parental advice known to mankind. They don't hear you. And as a matter of fact, they get angry at you. How dare you try to solve my problem? You just don't get me. And little ones might not be able to say that, but that's what they're feeling. So this is what we know to do. We are approaching with a more well-developed brain. Guys, there's such a simple solution to this. Yeah. Our kids can't even learn that solution. And so we meet them where they're at in their right brain, bring them over to the left brain. That creates integration. Okay. All right. Another whole brain strategy that he recommends is name it to tame it. So just naming feelings, them using the hand model of the brain. Where are you at in your brain right now? Oh, I'm about to flip my lid. That right there is naming how they're feeling, which helps tame how they're feeling. A lot of times, instead of name it to tame it, we just want to dismiss and deny like it's not even there. The child might say, I don't want to go to sleep. I'm afraid of mummies. Don't worry. It's okay. You're fine. Mummies aren't real. We like dismiss and deny their feelings about this because a lot of things that kids feel, it doesn't make sense to us through our fully developed adult brain. So instead of that dismiss and deny, oh, you're fine. Come on. You're good. Don't worry about it. Nope. Nothing to worry about. We're dismissing and denying their feelings. Instead, name it and tame it. I don't want to go to sleep. I'm afraid of mummies. Yeah, that can be scary. Thinking about mummies can feel overwhelming. You know what? Let's change the picture in our head. Let's make that mummy less scary. How about him walking around in a tutu or doing silly dance moves? What kind of dance moves is he doing? I meet them where they're at. I name the feeling that they're feeling. And then maybe this is just a possible solution. They call it externalizing, creating a different picture. Personifying your worry is another thing that they do with naming it to tame it. So I want to show you this quick little video. Let me do a new share for this. Okay, hold on. Let me pull this over here. Let's see, I think I pulled it up over here and maybe I didn't. Oh, yes, and you're going to get a link to this. There's this really cool thing called Till and Whittle. So Till and Whittle are these two cartoon characters. Till is the thinker, Whittle is the worrier. And there's all these cool little videos about worry. It's actually creating a character for left brain and a character for the right brain. When we can be using these kinds of things and showing our kids these kinds of videos, we're helping them learn to name their feelings. They don't know what they're feeling. They just know how their body feels. So you'll get a link to that, but it's Till and Whittle, if you feel like writing that down for now. But that can be a great way to also help name it and tame it. All sorts of books on feelings, like the Worrysaurus is a really cute one. I love this one. For kids that are afraid to do things where they might have had an accident or something like that. This is Humpty Dumpty After the Fall. So guess what? Humpty Dumpty falls off a wall and then he's devastated. And it's so cute. It says all the king's horses and all the king's men put Humpty Dumpty together again. Well, most of him. They didn't put together his feelings. So now he has an absolute paralyzing worry of climbing everything tall. He can't go up on bunk beds. He won't go up on step ladders. And he's certainly not climbing back up on that wall, which he used to love to do so he could see the birds. So every day he passes the wall and he's so afraid, I can't do this. And then one day he says, you know what? I'm going to climb that wall. And he does. And he's like, I didn't look up. I didn't look down. I just put one foot in front of the other. And I was terrified. And then I made it to the top. And it was amazing. And then the cool way that the book ends is he actually, Humpty Dumpty breaks out of his egg and turns into a bird. So he can really fly, which is what he was meant to do all along. He would have never discovered that if he didn't overcome his worry. So I'm going to send you a bunch of links that Erin will actually send out after the class to videos, to book names, to any, like Julia Cook, any of her books. They literally teach you about feelings. I've got this cool thing, A Little Spot of Emotion, these books that we just got in our school counselor and our teacher libraries for things. They even have... in this little spot of emotion, they even have characters for the different feelings. And the characters are actually embedded into the story. So really, really cool stuff that can teach them the names, how to name how they're feeling. So first strategy was connect to the right, meet them where they're at in their feelings, bring them over to the left logic, help them plan solutions and problem solve and things like that. So number two, instead of dismissing and denying, name and tame it. Help them identify the feelings that they're having. And once they can do that, then we can move towards taming it. Use the hand model of the brain for them to describe what they're feeling in their body. That's naming what they're feeling. And then just that step of identifying it helps lead to the calm down process. Now, I mentioned some of those social stories. There's a really, so I've linked to some videos. The great thing is you don't have to go and buy everything. You actually have a bunch of stuff online that you can use. But, our kids are watching all sorts of videos. They're just watching YouTube, aimlessly, Netflix, whatever, the Minecraft, whatever. What if you built in some, like a playlist of videos that you started sitting and watching with them for a little bit. Because heck, I want to watch technology. Sure, mom, I'll watch that. But there's a lot of books that they have them on YouTube. So someone actually reading a Julia cookbook, or they've made little videos out of these things. And what I do as a school counselor is anytime I'm getting ready to go do a guidance lesson or something like that, I'll literally get on YouTube and do social emotional stories about worry. And it'll pull up all sorts of stuff. And I just kind of look through those. Social emotional stories about anger. It'll pull up all sorts of stuff and I can look at those. Take advantage of technology. But things that are specifically related to worry, I've put some links here, and those are all going to get emailed to you after the class. Anything Julia Cook writes too, she actually is as a counselor. She's written so many books that teach kids about everything from My Mouth is a Volcano for kids who have these loud, angry outbursts. There's even books called Pig the Stinker, of a little pug who refuses to take a bath. There's a book for everything. It's unbelievable. Also, that movie Inside Out is a really good movie. If you haven't watched it, it's a really good movie that helps kids understand their brain. I have a friend that I went to college with. He has a son who has autism, and he just could never quite connect. He's a very intelligent little guy, but could never quite connect. And so he's found that with him watching certain movies together and cartoon movies, it's actually giving him words and images in his brain to help identify a feeling. When he saw Inside Out together, the dad's like, I cannot explain what a difference that made for him. Number one, it helped build his understanding of the brain, but like when he saw anger as a cartoon character, it just developed his understanding about that. It helped him have better control of his own anger and reactivity. And also realizing, the theme of the movie is all the feelings have a job. It's not like we can only be happy all the time. It's not possible. We can't always not be worried. I don't want to be worried so much that it's shutting me down and being so persistent and so overwhelming and so intense. But we're going to have things that we're scared of, and teaching them coping skills for that. So social stories are a great way to name and understand worries. There's also even templates that you can create your own social story. And Mr. Rogers, he's a great one. My son used to have a crippling fear that he was going to get flushed. He was going to get sucked down the toilet when the toilet flushed. Potty training was really hard for him. Then at the same time, he developed a fear that he was going to get sucked down the drain when I put the drain down in the bathtub. His brothers the thought never even crossed their mind, and he would be in a panic. Now, of course, for me, I just avoided it. He didn't have to see me flush the toilet, all those things. Thank goodness they didn't have automatic flushers back in the day, or he would have never gone to the bathroom for the rest of his life. I wish that I would have taken opportunities when he wasn't in the bathtub and created a social story about where the water goes. Mr. Rogers did stuff like that. He had songs that he made. Daniel Tiger is another great one that has songs that he makes to help you understand stuff. That can be great for younger children too. All right. Now, another important thing is creating new brain patterns. Okay. So the brain is a pattern seeking device. So the way that we form our memories, our habits, our ways of doing things is our brain's always making connections. And it's building little pathways in the brain. They call them neural pathways, which are nerves communicating to each other. Well, if the nerves communicate to each other over and over, and every time I get angry, this is how I show it. Every time I get worried, this is how I show it. This is what I do. This is how my body feels. Well, that becomes a well-established pattern in your brain, like just your brain's typical, it almost becomes automatic way of responding. All right. Now, this is hard. If you've got a well-established pattern of anxiety, your brain knows what to do. It goes into freak out mode and protects you and saves your life every 15 minutes. That's what your brain thinks it's doing. But on the other side of that, the dark side of that is, now I'm afraid to do stuff. I won't go introduce myself to somebody. I have a hard time making friends. There's a lot of things our kids and we can struggle with. So if we're going to create new patterns, mindfulness are brain-based strategies that when I am doing certain visualizing things, I am actually, when I'm doing that, I'm actually developing new patterns in my brain. I participated in this brain study at Laureate Institute for Brain Research. And if you ever want to get paid for sitting in an MRI machine, go for it. I literally only did this, gosh, it was about 10 years ago, 8 years ago, something like that. I only did it because I got paid $50 an hour for sitting in an MRI machine and I needed the money. So it actually had you sit in the MRI machine while you were focusing intensely on happy memories, because it was a thing designed for people who might be struggling with depression. So you were supposed to focus and visualize intensely happy memories. At the same time, it was showing you your blood flow to the parts of the brain that are associated with happiness. And your goal was to push that blood flow, that little line on the screen, past this point. And the way you do that is focusing on happy memories. So yeah, I've got plenty of not happy memories, but I would focus on the first time Austin walked and the funny time Dylan first crawled. And, my one son who always had this one tooth, and the silly smile that he did. I would focus on those things and the blood flow would increase to that part of the brain. What was actually happening was I was creating new pathways. And I tell you what, it was hard to focus when you have a sad brain. It's hard to calm down when you have an anxious brain. So practicing these things, building them into a daily schedule, building them into our coping skills, so it's second nature, we create new pathways in the brain. Sesame Street has done a wonderful job. They combined with the app Headspace, which is a wonderful app for adults on mindfulness, meditation kind of things. It's brain exercises. So many people get a little worried, especially if we are from a religious background, that we are somehow, like it's weird or bad or something to be doing these things. There are plenty of very spiritually based meditations. There are straight up brain-based mindfulness exercises, which just are specific things that strategically are making you access different parts of your brain so you can calm down. But Sesame Street partnered with Headspace and they have cartoon characters and they have these different mindfulness things. Like if you're a child who's really impatient, if you have a child who has a hard time going to bed because they're scared or they're all amped up, they have a meditation for that. By doing that little thing, it actually helps calm their brain down. And guess what? The body calms down too. They have one for focus, one for try it again, belly buddy breathing, freeze for self-control. They have all these cute little mindfulness things, which seem simple. You are brain training. The brain automatically, especially a child's anxious brain, is going to just go to freak out mode. If I want to disrupt that, I have to practice over and over new ways of doing things. So I don't go there, I go this way. Or I catch myself when I'm starting to go there and I go this way. So those are some. I also want to show you, let me do a quick new share. Okay. They have, let's see here. I'm going to push this up here. Okay, they even have like a family mindfulness schedule. So here's how you can build it into your day with waking up, do a quick 5 senses, which is where you have your children take a minute, hear something they can see, smell, hear, taste, and touch. Those are the 5 senses. A body scan. We start at our toes, we squeeze our toes. Okay, we're working up, squeeze the legs. Okay, we're working up, squeeze those thighs. Okay, squeeze that tummy, squeeze that chest. Okay, let's look at our arms, squeeze those arms, flex those fingers. Let's move our neck. How are we feeling in our neck? Do a nice circle. Let's tense our back. And all right, I just built body awareness. I could identify areas maybe where I was stressed out. Guess how long that takes? 45 seconds. Building this in on a day in, day out basis to your family schedule can really be a preventive thing. And then when we are having an anxious crisis, I can jump in and use one of these to respond to it too. But now I know it. It's not like someone saying, take deep breath, Lauren. Well, you know what? I want to take deep breaths. I want to yell at you and run away. Now this is a normal thing. I know how to take deep breaths because I've done it before. Meals, have a mindful check-in, start a conversation about what's going on right here, right now. Mindful eating instead of rushing through a meal. Okay, guys, we're going to have some mindful chewing for the next 2 minutes. I want you to be paying attention to that food in your mouth as you're chewing it. Travel, I Spy, keeps them in the here and now and keeps them looking for things right here. The alphabet game. So it gives you all sorts of different things that you can do for family mindfulness. And also, let me move this over a little bit. There's even mindfulness exercises for children that will also send to you. And then this idea about grounding. Grounding is where, instead of worry is always out here worrying about what's about to happen and what's going to happen and what might happen. And, it's not actually in the here and now. Typically, yeah, there might be something in the here and now. A bear is chasing you. A lot of us aren't experiencing that. We just feel like a bear is chasing us. So, one of those grounding techniques is a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Tell me 5 things you can see, and have the kids say it out loud. All right, what's 4 things you can feel? Have them say it out loud. 3 things you can hear. 2 things you can smell. 1 thing you can taste. On a brain level, when they're anxious and in flip out, freak out mode, they're in their limbic system. They have flipped their lid. Their limbic system isn't focusing on 5 things I can see. This part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, that is able to focus on these things. When I force myself to do this, 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste, I've just brought my brain into what's happening right here, right now in the room. Because I'm not seeing things that I'm not seeing. These are things that are happening right here and now. It kind of brings your brain back online. For those of you who really struggle with anxiety or have kiddos that do that, my brother-in-law, he's a therapist, worked with people struggling with addiction. And he always told people, do a take 5, do a grounding technique, but he didn't really do it. So he's like, you know what? And he was really stressed starting a new job. He's actually running a director of this huge thing, kind of like a family and children's services in Maine, Massachusetts area. So he set his watch to beep every hour on the hour. So it's 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock during the wake hours. And when the watch would beep, he would literally do 1 minute, do a take 5. What's 1 thing I can see, hear, smell, taste, and touch? He wasn't thinking about the meeting that was about to happen. He wasn't thinking about the email he had to respond to. I'm just going to do a quick take 5. And he did that every hour on the hour during work days. Within 3 days, he's like, I could not believe the difference. And in that 3 days, he had invested, so 8 hours a day times 3, he had invested 24 minutes, give or take, of grounding techniques. And in that 3 days, with that established pattern, his brain could get back to not focusing about things that I don't have control over right now. So little things like that can really add up to a big difference. Okay. All right. Moving on. So 21. I never have enough time. I need you for 3 hours, but that would make you anxious. All right. Also, there's some really good websites. The Therapist Aid website is so cool. On the Therapist Aid website, you literally pull it up and it's got all this. If you're a counselor, fantastic resource. Tons of things. It's got great stuff for parents too. It's got great stuff for teens that they can look stuff up and kind of start to take responsibility for some of their own mental health stuff. But literally, you pull it up and you do a search, anger. It pulls up videos, resources, cognitive worksheets, all sorts of stuff. That family mindfulness schedule and those children mindfulness activities and that grounding activities are straight from the Therapist Aid website. Pull up anxiety, pull up worry, pull up stress, and it'll pull up all sorts of topics that are related to that are good to go. So it could be great tools that you could use at home. The Positive Psychology website has a lot of great cognitive behavioral technique, kind of change my thinking, which changes my thinking, which influences my behavior. The Smiling Mind app is really good for kids. The Breathe app, the Breathe Kids app, and the Mindful Powers app. Those are some good ones. In the Mindful Powers app, there's like this little ball that keeps fidgeting around when it's really upset and angry, and the children just kind of stroke it through their touch screen, and then it starts to calm down and purr. Well, that's focusing. It's a really cool thing. One of the counselors that I used to work with, Tina Owen, she told me about that one. It was really cool. So there's some good ones. Headspace is a great one for grown-ups. Really wonderful website. Now, another couple of things too, there can be different kinds of therapy. If you've had a child who's experienced a traumatic thing, I had a friend whose son swallowed some, like a quarter or something like that, developed a pathological fear of all money, any kind of coins. Couldn't do the coin toss at soccer games, couldn't get an allowance, couldn't even go into the grocery store. It was traumatic if any money was involved. He was just so worried other people were going to swallow it. So she took them for EMDR, which is a brain-based counseling technique that actually you bring up painful memories while you're holding these paddles or something that's making your left brain and right brain turn on and off. So the paddles might be vibrating. So left brain, the left paddle vibrates, the right paddle vibrates while you are processing with these specific techniques a stressful memory or something like that. So left, right's going on. That's happening in your brain is left, right is switching on and off. And while you're bringing that memory up, just the back and forth, going back and forth in your brain, that brain activity actually disrupts that overwhelming physical and emotional response we have to those memories. Like when we were like, I shouldn't be having such a huge reaction, but you kind of can't control it. EMDR is really good for that. And sometimes our kiddos, our anxious kiddos, they might not have experienced an actual trauma, but they've imagined it. Their brain gets away from them. And so EMDR can be great. Neurofeedback is another really good brain-based counseling intervention, therapeutic intervention. It's literally just training brain function and teaching the brain to work more effectively. So just like I sat in the MRI machine and I had some neurofeedback where I watched the blood flow in real time and where it was going to my brain, neurofeedback has activities that you or your children can do that help you pay attention and do these activities that actually kind of get your brain back in line. And they even like do a whole map of the brain because different things really help. I had two of my sons do some neurofeedback when they were going through some really stressful times in high school and they just couldn't snap out of it. They were having a hard time falling asleep. And she just said, their brain waves were just going a mile a minute. After neurofeedback, you could actually see the brain waves had slowed down. Well, I can think all sorts of logic thoughts, but if my brain waves are going like this, it's kind of like a car stuck in high gear. I can't just think my way out of that. So neurofeedback can be a really good way to kind of calm that down. Actually, insurance covers most of neurofeedback, but typically you have an EEG, which is like a brain electric scan of your brain. You have that. And that usually is an out-of-pocket cost, but everybody's different. So I know if you just Google neurofeedback in Tulsa, there's lots of different places that offer that. That could be helpful for you. All right. And also just mindfulness things, like box breathing. So, and I'll send you a link to a video, but in this video, I'm going to show you a quick little video so you can kind of see what is Lauren talking about. She is crazy. All right. So box breathing. I've liked this. I've used this in my groups at school and kids really like it. So I'm not going to show the whole video, but it kind of gives you an idea of box breathing. It's a visualization technique while I'm also breathing. But if I'm imagining drawing a box with my breath, guess what I'm not imagining? The thing I'm scared about, the thing I'm worried about. This brings your brain back online. So let's kind of watch this.
With your back straight and body relaxed, let your arms hang by your side if you're standing, or if you're sitting, rest your hands on your knees. Now we're going to silently count to 4 as we breathe. Follow the picture on your screen and breathe in as the arrow moves up one side of the square. Hold your breath at the top. Breathe out as the arrow moves down the other side, and hold your breath again at the bottom. Okay, starting on one side of the square. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out all the way, 3, 4, and hold your breath, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in. Keep going, sinking your breath.
Now I know you would love to keep doing that, but then all of you would fall asleep. Actually, we've got just a few minutes, so I want to finish up and leave you with a few more practical things. Box breathing, it's a great technique. And you don't even have to have a video to show that. You can literally imagine yourself breathing in one side of the box, hold it, breathing out one side of the box, hold it. But in the initial training stages, you might need to watch a video for that. And then you can do it on your own. So can your kids. If they really struggle with getting up and going to school or right before sports activities or whatever it might be, all right, let's do some box breathing. We're going to tell our brain to calm down because our brain can handle this. and do the skills. It's a mindfulness. I'm creating new patterns in my brain. Another thing too is, and remembering with anxiety not being a behavior, it's a state of the brain working in those preventive things like mindfulness rituals, responses, those kinds of things. I actually have, we did a whole thing a few years ago at my school, at another school actually, where we made a calm down box. These are just those basic little shoe boxes that you can get. They're the cheapest at Home Depot, actually. They're like 97 cents. You can get them at the dollar store. You can get them at Walmart. But what if each child had their own calm down box? What if in that calm down box, they put things, goodness gracious, kids are into poppets. You've seen all, if you don't know what a poppet is, then that's a great thing to get for Christmas. All right. Little squishies can be great. Orbeez. In November, actually, Erin's going to be doing a calming water bottle event where she will actually mail you the supplies to make a calming water bottle. As a family, you guys can tune in and you can make a calming water bottle with Orbeez and glitter and other things that go in that. And that can go in your family calm down box. I love this one. This is at the Five Below store back in the exercise part. This is $3, I think, maybe $4. And it's a dice and it's got a yoga positions. So knees to chest if it lands on that, downward dog if it lands on that, triangle pose if it lands on that. Now I'm not good at yoga, but what's so funny is I actually bought these and then I'm there. Of course, I'm like, oh my gosh, the office needs this. So I bought one for each office at our school and one for the other counselor and one for me, and then one for the principals. And what's so funny is I didn't realize a couple of our admin staff, when they would get stressed out, they actually built in, they're like, okay, throw the ball. And they would do the little poses as a joke. I have someone who's on the other side of the screen. Her kids like to play with this ball at school down in the office. So that could be in your calm down bucket. I love making Orbeez gloves, which are really cool. Any kind of slime or squishy. And these things are cool. We just got these yoga cards for kids. They're like laminated and it's really cool. They can even make your own, you can make your own little flashcards in there of things I can do to calm down. Maybe there's a little poster that's helpful. Maybe there's a book that they like to read. And it doesn't even have to be a feelings book. It could be a book that makes them laugh or shifts their mode. I really like these things too. These, I always just thought they were for fun, but it's actually a breathing ball. I can breathe in and I can slow myself down while having a visual reminder of that. Learning Express is a very dangerous place. Has every kind of fidget known to mankind. So if you're looking for holiday presents for your children, go there, but put a limit on what you spend because you could walk out of there completely broke. But these sensory things, that can just be something that gets you out of the here and now. And really some people are like, oh, all these fidgets, it's just a joke. What if you actually train them to think like this? Think of them like a remote control. If I am on a channel that I don't like when I'm watching TV, oh gosh, I don't want to watch this show about hunting. I just don't want to watch it. Man, I'm so mad. Why do I have to watch this show? Well, you don't have to sit there and watch it. You can change the channel, but the channel's not going to change itself. Doing some of these things on purpose to calm down is like the remote control for your brain. All right, my brain is in this state right now. And the more we're teaching our kids about their brain and what's going on in their brain, the better it is. All right, what can we do on purpose to change the channel? I'm going to change it from stress to calm. What can I do to change the channel from anger to calm? What can I do to change the channel from sad to happy? Well, everyone's different. Some kids like to listen to music. Some kids need to move. Some kids like their sensory toys and their fidgets. Do what works for them, but be teaching into that. Just going and getting a fidget from the store is not going to do anything. When you're saying, man, when your brain's about to flip its lid, if you do this squishy toy, you're actually calming your brain down. That's teaching them. Some people even like to make a calm down space at home, or kids have one in their room. It can be super simple. I mean, just taking a shower curtain rod, getting some sort of curtain from the dollar store, getting some really simple, LED or Christmas lights, having some pillows that you already have around the house and a blanket, having a basket of books. I had one kid at school who actually did this in his closet. He's like, yeah, I've got pillows all over the floor in my closet and I put my bookshelf in the closet, and he got these LED color changing lights. And when he gets stressed out, he goes in his closet and that's like his safe space. We can have these things too for us. So just creating those. I already mentioned the mood meter. That's a great way to learn to identify feelings. In the heat of the moment, besides that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 thing I talk about, this is a good one too, hand breathing. Breathing in and out as I trace my finger. Well, guys, you have your hands. So, okay, let's do hand breathing. I've got a gal I'm working with at school, and we've been practicing different things when she would come to me, and this actually one was her favorite. I tried the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and she just couldn't keep track of the numbers. But that I said, which one's your favorite? And she said, this one was her favorite. Now she's still having a hard time applying doing these things because she's so used to just going to freak out crying mode. But hey, it's a start. If we can start and we can practice in 3rd grade, it's going to make a huge difference for the rest of us. So there'll also be a whole bunch of other strategies that are emailed to you. And I want to finish with one more cool one. Sometimes too, our kids have a tendency to hold on to things, hold on to stresses and hold on to things. So sometimes we have to create these rituals to learn to actually let things go. You can have something you're really, really afraid of. All right. They can write it down. And this is a personal hand shredder. And then let me get it started. It's not as easy to hold up. And you shred it and let it go. This is such a helpful thing. I got this on Amazon. It's just a personal hand shredder. I think it was $14.99. That could be a daily ritual. All right, what were some things that were really hard for you today? Let's write them down, and we're going to let them go. I'm purposefully visualizing myself letting them go. And it's so weird. On a brain level, I'm activating different parts of my brain to choose to let that go. I've got a visual reminder that I let that go. I had a kid who was holding grudges against kids in his class and even made a list, of people he was angry at. And I'm like, yeah, it sounds like you hold on to grudges a lot. I said, yeah, that's a tough one, because you know what it does? It keeps you mad all the time. How about you write down some of those things that you're angry about? Let's shred it. He loved the shredder. I mean, things like that can be really good rituals. So there'll be more stuff that'll be emailed to you as a part of the presentation because we ran out of time. But I'm hoping, I know I slammed you with a bunch of information. What I'm hoping is your takeaways are, you know what? Anxiety is a state of the brain. How about I start, instead of reacting to my child's behavior, which also needs to be done, that's not the whole picture. What if I can start to teach them how to handle and understand their brain? I teach them how to do things on purpose to change the channel in their brain. How can I connect to their feelings and then redirect with logic? What strategy is going to work for my kid? And what works for you might not work for your kid. So, just be aware of that. One strategy, if you're going to make a family calm down box, is, like I said, Erin is going to be running a calming water bottle event where if you register for it, stuff gets mailed to you, like actual supplies to build a calming water bottle. And then you can register for the event. She'll send out an email about it, but that'll be November 9th. And then on December 7th, I had to remind myself, I'm going to do another online presentation about growth mindset. It's also got some great brain information, but also shifting into I'm not going to give up and quit. I'm going to persevere and, change and grow. And my brain is growing when I'm doing things that are hard. It can be a really powerful concept if you have a child who struggles with anxiety, because you know what they like to avoid? Hard things. So these are just things that will be available for you through Oklahoma Family Network. And I highly recommend just being on their email list like you are for registering for this. I mean, she sends stuff out all the time. That's great. And their website's a great resource. And it's also a great place to find support because all of us have kids that have extra needs. Obviously, if over 200 something people registered for the workshop, anxiety is an issue. And that's also a great place for you to be able to respond and say, hey, I would love more stuff on this or more stuff on that, because they're always finding speakers and finding people to help you talk about topics that you are interested in.